Hi, Leslie. Thank you so much for joining this podcast episode. How are you today?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
The pleasure is mine. Super excited to have a conversation with you. I know, we supposed to do the last year the podcast. So obviously, I wasn't well, so we have to reschedule and doing it today. So I really, really appreciate your time today. So we're going to talk about in this episode, which is like a burnout. So I know, like a lot of people struggle through burnout because of their business they're running or a project or even the professional life a lot of time. So before that, I'd love to know more a little bit about yourself, like your journey into business world, what you used to do before that and how did you come up with the idea like starting your own business?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, I have a little over 4 decades of experience working for law firms, in law firms. I started out in at 19. I became a legal secretary. That's what they used to call it.
Mhm.
And over the years, transitioned into doing paralegal work. And I had been working full time up until my mid 50s. And I started to up to my mid 50s. And then I started to recognize that I needed more for my life because I was feeling really, really exhausted all the time. I felt like I had no quality of life.
Mhm.
And I felt like, especially with my marriage, there really wasn't quality of life for our marriage because I really didn't feel like doing anything when I would get home. I was exhausted. And so I recognized then that something needed to change. I didn't know how to go about it, like what that would look like. But I ended up having a conversation with my husband about something we had been talking about. We had talked about previously. We were living in California at the time, and we were talking about perhaps moving from California to Las Vegas. We were living just outside of San Diego,
Right.
and we decided, well, let's start planning for it. So we did start planning for it. This was mid 2017. We were planning for it, and by March of 2018, we took a week off from vacation and we went to Las Vegas and we got ourselves set up with a place to live. We got ourselves a storage unit for some of our belongings. We had our landlord available and ready to set everything up, internet, phone, all of the things that we needed, so that when we were going to return in 2 weeks, that we were going to have everything set up. Um, there was no other plan other than that was the plan was just to move and to make change. Now, what that involved was going back to work and giving my notice of 2 weeks. I'd been with them for 2 years, and I gave them 2 weeks notice that I was leaving. It was scary.
Yeah.
But I knew then that the one thing that I felt like I was a slave to was my time.
Mhm.
My time really was so wrapped up in work that there was no time for quality of life. And the one thing I could do without really having any other, I guess, safety net was take back my time and how I controlled it. And so doing that, I took back that part of it and being able to go in and say, this is what I'm doing. We're leaving in 2 weeks. But I also had a plan that I knew that we could work something out. And I was confident enough that knowing that we could work something out that I could still support them online in a position online. And so working with the managing partner and with some of the other lawyers in the office, we created a plan where I could support them at the end of their closing. So they represent lenders who
Right.
are, lend out to
Yeah.
small business loans. And so we were able to create that position. And that was back in March of 2018. And I'm still doing that. That's part of my first step into entrepreneurship, my own business. And what that allowed me to do was freed up the time to see what else I could do, what else I could be, actually have quality of life.
Mhm.
And I hit the ground running. Once we got there, I got out networking and meeting new people, learned about self-development, which I love. I think it's something that I never even thought would be on my radar, but it was something that I learned to love. I love to learn. And through that journey, going through some healing and recognize that what I have learned through my own healing process, I could teach to others because I knew that there was really a need for it,
Yeah.
especially when I started speaking to more and more women. And so I started coaching back in December of 2018. And now it's now it's 5 years. I just hit the 5-year mark. But now I've really dialed it into more of why burnout. This is what we want to talk about today, was I started realizing my own journey of being in law for so long, and the reason why I took that leap of faith without really knowing if it was going to work or not, because I was feeling burnt out. I knew that. And I wanted now full circle to come back and work with uh, companies, well, female-owned companies, to help them to have that wellness structure within their company so that they have quality of life within the work environment, but also that it can transition out into their personal lives.
Mhm.
And I understand how important that is, because I have had many conversations over the past year with women who've actually gone through burnout, and some of them almost losing everything
Yeah.
because of, it's like that silent creeper. It comes up on you and all of a sudden it's there. And then how do you deal with it? And so that's why it became really important to me that this is a conversation that, although it's being talked about, I really feel that it needs to have more eyes on it. And so, and bringing that in the environment where it's business, and self-care, that I think will allow for the CEO and her team to really thrive together professionally and have that quality of life outside of the office.
Yeah, that's great. That's great journey. So obviously you've seen the pattern of your journey, like you burning out yourself from the job, and then you needed to make a change. And now obviously you're helping other people. So how did you recognize like you burning out? Is it like when you have the lack of time you realize, or like you cannot focus on other things in your life, like you're not feeling about yourself, that the joy is not there? How did you recognize your burnout? Because a lot of
Yeah,
people
well, there's
like they don't know like how to recognize their burnout. They goes after, and then some people tells you like you burned out. I was like, huh? No, I'm fine. You know what I mean? Like, so how did you recognize it?
yeah, well, so burnout, the thing about burnout is that it creeps up on you. You don't even recognize it. There's different stages. So I actually did a workshop a few months ago, around recognizing like the different signs of burnout. And so like there's like the honeymoon stage. Now, people would say, well, why would that be considered burnout? Because what happens is you get into this place where, especially if you're working on something new, we're in a brand new year, people have
Yeah.
set goals for the year. And sometimes they get into the beginning of the year and they're hitting the ground running, but they also are feeling like they have to do everything in month one. And that's not the case. But because they are so excited about it, they start pushing, and they stop recognizing that some of the essentials of self-care that I teach around, like taking mental breaks throughout your day and also having a hard stop at the end of your day so that you're not always working, they tend to like ignore those signs that they're not doing that. And so you continue that pattern long enough, um, soon soon you'll find yourself stepping into the second. And at first, let me back up a second. Like the first, as I was saying, is the honeymoon stage where you're feeling excited.
Mm,
You're ready. You're moving and moving and moving, and you're not paying attention to that. You should still keep self-care as part of the process. Then you move into onset of stress and burnout. And what ends up happening there is all of a sudden you start feeling less motivated, you're tired, you may be cranky, you might be like irritable, snapping at people with
mm,
not meaning to, but they just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And and you find yourself like having that lack of motivation, which can stop you and you lose momentum. And then you get into this whole self-talk where you're making yourself feel bad about not staying in momentum, and you start finding all kinds of reasons to support that you're not good enough or not worthy to do what you're doing, and you might even quit. I've been at that place where I wanted to quit multiple times and still until I started recognizing my patterns. Then you get into that next phase, which is that on like you get into that next phase where you're starting to feel like, okay, I really need to take time, maybe even to the point where some of the things that I used to find joy in, I am now going to say no. It is learning to say no, but or maybe not right now, and learning how to prioritize your tasks, having clarity around what you're doing. I mean, there's a whole thing that goes, a whole lot of different steps that go into how you care for yourself. But when you get into that phase where you're starting to feel like, okay, now I have to, I'm really stopping. You have a lot of days where maybe you don't even you might miss meetings. You
Mm.
might forget about meetings. You don't show up, and then you recognize, oh my gosh, I missed something, and you're embarrassed. And so, you know, it gets from there, but then and that's really, you're getting further and further along the journey, and you've created this habit, this pattern where you still are not stopping yourself from the long days, that you're not putting in, as I would say, buffer time when you have goals. If you have a 4-week goal, add in a couple of weeks, because life doesn't just say, oh, you've got a goal, I'm going to sit back and let you finish. Things happen. So
Yeah.
putting in that buffer time, not overwhelming your calendar. But so you're in that place where now you've overwhelmed yourself, and you're saying to yourself and to others, well, I just have so much to do and I don't have the time to stop. I have to continue going. I have deadlines that I have to meet, which then will lead you. And of course, if you continue to ignore that, what ends up happening is you will end up, I'm not saying you might, you will end up in the burnout phase. Like, you are going to be burnt out. And this is where a lot of people, a lot of the women that I've spoken to have ended up, where they have, not only have their bodies started to physically manifest things, and I've had that happen with me, but they'll manifest things in their bodies where they might end up in the hospital. They will have to take a leave of absence. So when I'm saying, I'm not saying you may have to, it's you will have to take a leave of absence.
Yeah.
You most likely will lose revenue because you're not able to do anything. Like, physically, you are just unable.
Mm.
And and so then you find yourself losing that, loss of revenue, losing momentum, maybe losing credibility. And it all could have been avoided if you had made sure that along your journey, you were putting in your breaks, you were making sure that you weren't overwhelming your calendar, learning how to say yes. You had clarity around what you were doing so that your management of your tasks was productive, like it was
Yeah,
effective, I should
so
say,
that's
for
going to
you,
be like
so
my
that
second question is like, how do we do that? Like, how not to like get overwhelmed? How to know like what's our limit is?
yeah, well, again, it comes down to knowing what you want. Like, I
Mm.
think really when you hear people say know your why, I never really fully understood that until one day I understood that, oh, my why will help me to show up in the things I say, how I think, the things I do. And
Yeah.
when you have clarity about what you're doing and the why behind it, and then you know exactly it, everything that you do comes from that place. And so from that place, you have clarity. You have to understand obviously what your goals are, but having, when they say like SMART goals, things that you can actually do that
Mm.
are achievable, that are not they're I know people say like think outside of the box and think outrageous goals, and that's great. But especially when you're first starting out, or if you are starting to grow or expand your business, or you're trying to get a team together to be on the same page, you want to make sure that, first of all, your goals are reasonable, that everyone can help you meet. So I would say that when it comes to your scheduling is like, really, first of all, I would say put your personal life on your calendar first. And that means putting yourself on your calendar first, allowing yourself to say, I'm honoring me because I'm important. Because
Mhm.
without you taking care of you, everything else can fall apart. But if you take care of yourself first, then you can show up as the best that you can when people say being your best self. So it's really like having that clarity around what you do so that you can then start looking at the bigger picture. What is my yearly goals? How can I break them down into monthly goals? How can I break those down into quarterly goals? How can I break those down into weekly goals? And when you have that, then you can look at your goals for 1 week, and you're not looking all that far ahead. You just look at that week, and you then break those down into manageable steps that you as the just alone, just you personally can meet. Now, if you are managing a team, this is where you also have to have the rhythm, have your finger on the rhythm of your team, their time, like what they're doing, how are they managing their time? What are the goals that you have for them, the tasks that you have for them? Are they attainable within that time frame that you've given them? But it really comes down to being responsible about that and not overwhelming not only yourself but your team so that you can grow the way you want to weekly, monthly, quarterly, biannually, and annually. So it really comes down to, I think the first thing is knowing your why you're doing it, having that vision, and then being able to like really and having clarity about that, what your goals are, and then being able to really map it out and get your calendar in order.
That's great. Thank you so much. So yeah, so what would be like your number one advice for someone is already burnt out and they want to get out of it? I know like we've talked about a lot of things, but what would be like a number one in the first thing like you would go for? Like this is the one you need to work on first before you do anything else. I know we talked about small goals and everything, how we can chunk out, but what would be like your number one thing?
Yeah, well, especially because if you're in business, and of course your business just can't stop, but you're in burnout. So one of the biggest things I think a lot of people have trouble with is asking for help. And if you ask for help, that helps you to be freed up from the burden of having to do everything yourself.
Hmm.
So when you ask for help, bring people in that can help you to, whatever the tasks are that you are not able to get to, that you're able to assign to them, that like them, you trust them, they've been trained by you to do the task. But the most important thing is to take care of yourself, making sure that you look at your calendar moving forward. And as I was saying earlier, is make sure that everything about you personally, your self-care goes on your calendar first. It's essential. It's important. Also making sure that the essentials of self-care that will support you, like my top three are like learning to say no, asking for help, and taking mental breaks. So if you're working on something, making sure that you're taking breaks in between, like no more than a 90-minute stretch, because all you're doing then is just filling your brain with so much, and it can only take so much, and you'll find yourself mentally exhausted by the end of the day.
Yeah.
And then one of the last ones I think is really important is, this is hard, I know, for some entrepreneurs because they do offer services in the evening. So if you do offer services in the evening, I guess the real question is, how can it be that it's not every evening? Because you want to make sure that you're getting the proper rest. And how can you actually incorporate time for you, and if you have a family, spending time with them, so that you're not just all about work, because people don't get into business, and people actually probably don't even get into a corporate environment for less quality of life. They want more quality of life, and having a good job, having a successful business can help provide for that. But you want to make sure that quality of life is at the top of your list, and that starts with self-care, how you treat yourself, how your team members treat themselves, making sure that they also recognize that it's just as important for them to incorporate these types of things into their lifestyle.
All right, that's great. Thank you so much for the advice. So we're nearly coming to the end of this podcast. It's been a great pleasure having you on the show, Leslie. So if anyone wants to learn more about yourself, your business, where's the best place to find you?
Yes, so you can go to my website, which is herextraordinarylifebydesign.co. Or you can find me on LinkedIn under my name, Leslie Gaudet, or on Facebook under Leslie Gaudet.
That's great. Thank you so much for your time. I wish you best of luck with your business, your personal life, and you have a wonderful year ahead. And thank you so much for coming
Thank,
to the show today.
thank you so much for having me today.
Most welcome. Thank you. That's a wrap, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast episode with Leslie today. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. If anyone wants to learn more about her, you can visit her website or you can reach out to her on LinkedIn platform. So until then, I'll talk to you in the next episode. Take care.